Financial Survival Network, helping you to survive and thrive in the new economy. Get our complimentary newsletter at financialsurvivalnetwork.com. This is the Financial Survival Network.
Today's show is brought to you by PrepareWise. Rough weather's ahead, so it's time to prepare. Your leading source for emergency preparedness food. Go to preparewise.com and always use the code Lutz to get free shipping and a whole lot more. You are listening to the FinancialSurvivalNetwork.com. I'm Kerry Lutz on 1230 WBZT. Well, Obamacare is coming October 1st, and now even Warren Buffett has come out urging the president to scrap Obamacare and start over again. Here to talk about it, Warren Meyer, our resident expert on all things small business. Warren, welcome back to the Financial Survival Network.
Hey, thanks. It's great to be back.
Hey, so what's your thoughts here? Obamacare, it's getting closer and closer. Looks like the wussy Republicans in the House are not going to do a damn thing to stop it from occurring. What a shock there, huh?
Right.
And,
no shock there.
Yeah. You know, they have no spines, and they deserve to be voted out of office with everyone else there. And, you know, what do you do here? Basically, you turn everybody into a part-time employee, and, you know, it's just having awful repercussions. What are you seeing on the ground?
Well, here's what's been happening with us. We started looking at it 2.5 years ago and started trying to figure out what the cost is. And I gotta throw out a couple numbers about the business, because it's impossible to scale these without sort of understanding that. And so we've got a low margin business. We do about $8 million in revenues, which sounds great, but we make about probably 5% on that, which gives us about $400,000. So that's the key number. We make about $400,000, of which about half of that goes to new investments each year, capital and reinvestment in the company, and the other half I live on. And so the problem we face is the first time we tallied up how much Obamacare would cost us, we came up with a number, and our consultants came up with a number between $800 and $1 million. So we're talking about $800 $1 million, almost 10% of the revenues of the company, $800,000 $1 million, almost 10% of the revenue of the company, and 2 or 3 times how much the company actually makes. So we really kind of went into fire drill mode after that, saying, you know, this is just not, you know, we're not going to be able to survive this unless we do something substantially different in the business. And that's when we started taking a series of actions which are kind of very similar to what those you see in other places. And most specifically is we, after looking at all our options, we began converting people to part-time. We have a business that we already stitched together sort of customer service shifts from a number of different people, because obviously you can't have somebody working 5 days, 40 hours a week and cover a 7-day, 365 business. So we're already used to stitching shifts together. And so we sat back and said, well, if we can stitch, you know, a number of 40-hour shifts together to cover the whole week, why couldn't we just stitch together a few extra 29-hour shifts to cover the week? And that's really the plan we put together. And in fact, it actually turned out, because of the math and the number of hours in a week we had to cover, it's actually easier to do it with 29-hour shifts than 40-hour shifts. And so we began taking all of our employees this year and converting them to the part-time. In fact, we had to do it before this all got delayed. The clock began ticking on January 1st of this year. That means whatever that they were going to look back at this year and say whatever you did this year is what your employees would be classified as next year. So from January 1 of this year, we had to have people in place working part-time. Now, the Obama administration has delayed that for a year, but we haven't. There's no point in going back and switching back and forth again. We've stuck to our guns, and we're going to, you know, we've getting practiced at running the company with part-time workers.
So that's what you have to really understand, that even though the so-called employer mandate has been put off for a year, its actual impact upon the economy in terms of gamesmanship, and that's what you're doing, you're playing the game effectively, has had no effect, because you have to go on the assumption that next year the government will be true to its word, although it's never true to its word. But you have to go on the assumption that it will because you're a prudent businessman. So therefore, keep the part-time conversion going. And therefore, what you see the trend with your business and in America is we're becoming a nation of part-timers. And, you know, another little nugget that came out about Obamacare is that as of October 15th, if you don't give your employee a notification about Obamacare, you get fined $100 a day, even if you have just one employee. And I don't know what that notification is. I've got one employee, but somehow I have to figure out what the heck that notification is and then give it to the employee.
We actually have no idea. It's been frustrating for us because the rules of this stuff is not written. I mean, we were essentially guessing at the rules. I run a seasonal business. So somebody who's seasonal, so somebody who works, let's say full-time, you know, like 40 hours a week for 6 months, but then they're off the other 6 months, is that a full-time employee, or does that average out to 20 hours a week over 12 months? How does it work? It turns out the government hasn't written the rules for that to this day. We have no idea how the law is to be applied to our business, so we have to assume the worst possible treatment and be prepared for it. And just like you, I have no idea what this notification looks like. We're in the process of trying to get through all that, but the paperwork's only going to get worse because the law actually requires that you and I keep track of what health care decisions all of our employees make. So even if we don't provide, even if they don't take the company health care, I have to have a record of what health care insurance they did take. Did they go to the exchange? Which policy did they pick? Are they getting a... I have to have a record of all that, and the government hasn't figured out how that record will work.
What if they don't tell you?
And that's in fact why I got delayed, is they couldn't figure out how to write the rules for that record keeping. And my suspicion is a couple people they previewed with it probably just had a conniption fit looking at the paperwork and the absurd level of record keeping, not to mention the privacy issues inherent in that, and they had to put it off and said, well, we'll figure it out later. So that's where we stand, is we have probably the largest single, you know, sort of external event financially to ever hit our company, and we still don't know what the rules are or what's going to happen. And, you know, it really leaves us in a quandary. We're, you know, right now we began, there's a couple businesses, places that were already marginal that we actually, before they delayed this stuff, we actually chose to close down. We said, look, under Obamacare, there's no way we can make this workforce part-time. It's in California. It's already really difficult to manage. And so we started to shut down a number of our operations in California in advance of this, you know, sort of be prepared. So we're going to go ahead and continue with the shutdown, even though that's delayed, partially because California just raised minimum wages by 20%. So we're sort of happy to be gone and going to back out of that stuff. But there's a lot of implications that, and it's frightening to have, you know, $1 million issues that you don't know what the rules are as a business person.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is just filled with uncertainty. And, of course, the government thinks, so that won't have any effect on business or anything else. We don't have to worry about anything. People will just go ahead and invest because that's what they always do, right?
Right. Well, I don't know a single... I have some friends up in your territory up there, kind of private equity guys up there in Greenwich and such, and they own a number of restaurant chains, and I've talked to some other people that work in the restaurant business. I don't know a single restaurant that is going to have full-time labor anymore. I mean, they're all going part-time, but the administration still says, hey, no, we're not seeing this part-time thing. It's not in the data. It's not happening. It's only a few anecdotes. And I understand it's only a few anecdotes because there's only a few businessmen that are stupid enough to challenge Congress and the administration in public because they know that, you know, suddenly they'll get sat on the next time there's, you know, by something legislative or some rule, you know, kind of that they're worried about retaliation. So sure, there's not that many people going public about it, but it's a fact of the business. I mean, you can ask anybody in the hotel or restaurant business who works there. I have friends with kids who are working the resort business, and it's the only thing they talk about is that there's no full-time labor going to be available in the American, you know, retail service sector anymore.
Amazing. Amazing. And all in the name of trying to improve your health care coverage and trying to make your life better, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, the whole thing makes me crazy because it's on top of all this. If this was a teething pain to get to something intelligent, that would make sense. But the problem in healthcare has always been, in my mind, just the lack of price visibility, that we don't let the market forces and price models and things work and incentives work in the healthcare industry. And all this does is make it worse. It all moves us further and farther away from any kind of reasonable market in healthcare, which is what we use in everything else to allocate goods and make investments and to make sure that we have the capacity we need to get stuff. And so we all sit and scratch our heads and say, gee, why is healthcare, they all claim healthcare is different, needs a different regulatory environment, but they got it backwards. Healthcare is different because it has a different regulatory environment. There's no reason it wouldn't work using the same pricing transparency and market forces we have in every other business on the planet.
And that is the fact of the matter. And it used to be treated no different than anything else. And doctor got paid $10 for a house call when I was a kid, and the whole system seemed to work fine. And then the government stuck its nose into it with Medicare and Medicaid, and things have never worked right since then, Warren.
It's been eye-opening for me. I went to a high-deductible healthcare policy for me personally, one that I fear may be illegal soon. But I have a high-deductible healthcare policy, what I consider real insurance, not prepaid medical plan, but real insurance that I pay all my medical expenses up to a point where it would be a financial hardship for me, and anything above that, which I would call a financial disaster, like my home burning down, is what I actually insure for. So I pay out of pocket most of my annual medical expenses because they're well under that deductible. And it's a fascinating to go out and pay cash in the medical world, to actually shop for medical expense services when you've never shopped before, and to actually say you're paying cash. I went the other day and I bought x-rays for my son, who's an athlete, and they quoted some $200 or $300 price. I happened to ask because they figured it was going on insurance. I said, no, I'm paying cash. And they pulled out this book from under the table and blew off the dust on it, and I ended up paying $47. So when I was paying cash and actually price sensitive, they charged me $47 for something they hit the government or the insurance companies, for $250 or $300. I mean, it shouldn't surprise us that, if consumers don't care about the price and don't shop, that we have a cost issue in the medical profession.
A great point. We're going to talk more about that when we come back on the Financial Survival Network, 1230 WBZT. Jason Hartman has helped thousands of people realize their dreams of financial independence through real estate investing. And now he's got an unbeatable offer for you. He's offering you his proven course that thousands have used to build an income property empire, and it's free to the first 100 Financial Survival Network listeners. Just go to jasonhartman.com/Lutz and sign up today. For cash flow and capital appreciation, there's nothing else like it. Make your money work as hard as you do by building an income property empire. Real estate is America's proven investment. Go to jasonhartman.com/Lutz and get your free course today. That's Jason, HARTMAN.com/Lutz. Thousands have paid nearly $300 for this course, but for this short period of time, you can get it free. We're back. We're talking with Warren Meyer on the Financial Survival Network.com. I'm Kerry Lutz, 1230 WBZT. It's an interesting thing, Warren. I had some blood tests done a couple months back, and the bill was $495. Now, I happen to know that in the doctor's office, if you have those blood tests done and you pay cash, you can get it done for as little as $50. So we're looking at a markup of almost tenfold. I'm sure the insurance company probably pays $150, $200. Nonetheless, there are all these excesses, Warren, that under a competitive system, under a normal competitive system that was originally the way America worked, all these competitive excesses, these excessive costs, would be wrung out of the system by competition. But because the market is not allowed to function in the United States when it comes to health care, because, as you said, it's special, we don't have any mechanism for discipline for costs to be excessive costs to be wrung out of the system. And we have all of these anomalous price behaviors taking place. And then we need the heavy hand of Uncle Sam to say, no, $495 for a blood test is much too high. You can only charge $397, which is still too high. The market could do it so much better. Don't you agree?
I always use the example of cars. Let's say we had some kind of car insurance, which didn't prevent your car from breaking, but made sure that every year you had a car to drive. I mean, what would happen? First thing is, if you weren't paying for your own car, would you price shop? I mean, think about how much you price shop, you negotiate, you haggle for a car. Nobody would care. You want to charge me $100,000 for Camry? I don't even see the cost. I don't care. The second thing is, nobody would be buying Camrys. I mean, everybody would be buying Mercedes, right? So nobody would be out buying the value brands. We'd only have, Mercedes. And then throw into, so that's a bad enough picture. That's the price problem if you eliminate the pricing mechanism with third-party payers like we have done in medicine. But it gets worse because then the government comes along and let's say in that whole car business, they said, you know what, we're also going to restrict this so that you could only buy a car from GM and Ford. We're going to have a licensing regime where no other car maker is going to come in there. There's going to be no other competition. And they do that all over the place in the medical profession. They license hospitals, and you can't actually expand hospital capacity without going through an extensive, almost impossible process on the certificate of needs in these local markets. Not to mention what they do with doctors. They license and limit the number of doctors in the world, and then they make sure that simple things that even a nurse could handle or anybody could handle. You could have somebody who just goes to school for 2 months about how to stitch up a knee, and instead you've got this guy that went to school for 12 years, has to do it. And so we have all these crazy, not only have we screwed up the price side, but we have all these crazy limitations on capacity through licensing and regulation. It's incredible that it functions at all.
Yeah. Couldn't agree with you more on that. And all these inefficiencies, like you say, really, if you can work a staple gun now, you could stitch up a wound. Let's face it. I mean, there's a lot of things. For instance, I know when I have an ear infection, I just know it, and I don't really need to go to a doctor, spend $100-something bucks, even though insurance is paying for it, and go get a prescription for an antibiotic. In Europe and in Mexico and in so many other places, most drugs are available over the counter, but not in the United States. Right. Everything needs a prescription. And then when they try to make something available over the counter, Warren, it's a big fight with the drug companies, right?
And I mean, it's so funny you mentioned the ear infection. I had one. I actually have one currently. I went and my ENT tried to make me wait 10. It was hurting, and I knew all I needed is I'm going to go in there. He's going to look at it, and he's going to prescribe amoxicillin, which is what they typically do for ear infections. And so, but he wanted to charge several $100s, and I was going to have to wait days and days to get in. And so finally, I saw over at my local Walmart. I always seen this little walk-in clinic. So I was in Walmart. I went into the walk-in clinic. They had a doctor there. It still had to be a doctor, which is still frustrating. But they had a doctor. I paid I don't know what it was. It was less than $30 for the visit. She looked at it for 3 minutes. She looked in the ear, said, "Yep, you have an ear infection. You need some amoxicillin."
No kidding.
And got out of there. So that was at least somewhat of an improvement, though why I still needed to go to that gatekeeper, I'm not sure. But at least bringing a little competition in there and getting a much lower cost gatekeeper was at least a step in the right direction.
Yeah, well, in some places you can use a nurse practitioner and get drugs prescribed, but there's all sorts of rules and regulations, a lot of them unnecessary, and makes you wonder, what did we do in the world before we had all these rules and regulations? We were much healthier as a nation. Before, we ate better, we lived better, we were much more active, it was only after we got so sophisticated and the government started taking care of us that our health deteriorated to the extent that it has now. When you think about it,
Yeah, and it's a frustrating world, especially now that I'm growing old in it. The only thing worse than growing old in this kind of regime is going to be being young in this regime, because at least now growing old in this regime, Obamacare has decided that somehow I'm more worthy of subsidies than somebody who's younger. So, the whole structure of Obamacare, they talk about, well, we didn't have to raise taxes a lot. The reason they didn't have to raise taxes was, because they're going to force young, healthy people to overpay for insurance and force them into the system to do that overpayment, so that I get really cheap insurance, and given my health and the amount I use it. So for some reason, my kids are subsidizing my health care. I'm not really sure why that is, but that's going to be really interesting for that generation, that younger generation, to see how they react to the changes coming, because I don't think they really paid that much attention. It's going to be an eye opener, I think.
It's the American way, subsidies. It's just right. The American way. Subsidize thy neighbor, right?
Exactly.
So good things happening all over the place, and it's just going to have to play itself out. And my feeling has been that it wasn't going to become a reality. When you see the likes of Warren Buffett come out and speak out against it, one of the president's closest allies, right? Then you got to start wondering, is this thing really going to happen? I'm not sure about it, and I've always had my doubts. Could be the biggest red herring ever,
Well, Buffett, I was just thinking about that. Not only is he an ally of the president, but he has a lot of skin in the game to benefit from this. People, listen to the president's rhetoric and say, wow, this must really slam the insurance companies because he had so much anti-insurance company rhetoric. But in fact, Obamacare is basically a law that mandates people buy the insurance company's product. Who else in the whole world has a business where the government requires people to buy their product? So this is potentially a huge boon to the insurance industry, and Warren Buffett, a lot of his money is invested in the insurance business, and even so, if he's coming out against it, that's quite a bit of news.
Yep, it certainly is, and we're definitely gonna see some interesting things take place here, because whatever happens, the system can't go on the way it is. That's for sure. It's unsustainable. We know this, and it's unsustainable because the government stuck its nose into it in the first place, right?
Yep. So
on that note, people are going to want to find out more about you, Warren. They're going to want to go to your blog and look at your writing. Where do they go?
You can go to coyoteblog.com, and I write a lot on both this issue and many others, climate and the general political economy, as well as issues facing small business.
Hey, and it looks like the climate thing is really falling apart before our very eyes. And you look, and Australia, biggest climate change nut jobs on the planet, have elected a guy who's totally anti-climate change. So the nut jobs have lost one of their biggest allies with the recent election in Australia. Hopefully, it's a sign of things to come, right?
I hope so. I think the evidence is coming around to the arguments the skeptics have made for years, and I think people of goodwill who are honest with themselves are going to start recognizing that.
Yep, I think you're right. I really think you're right, and it won't be long now. So just keep your fingers crossed, right?
Right. Yes.
All right. Thanks for being on, Warren. And, of course, go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Links to Warren's site, and you can read all about it there. We'll talk with you again soon, Warren. Be well.
Thank you.
Hi, it's Kerry Lutz. I recently decided to move my retirement account into physical precious metals to hedge against the coming times. If you want to move an existing retirement account into physical precious metals, that you can hold in your hand, tax-free. There's no company that can do it more quickly and efficiently than Regal Assets. It took them just 24 hours to open my new IRA account, and all I had to do was fill out one simple form. The best part is that Regal Assets does all the work for you. They cover the setup and administrative costs for 2013. If you're interested in making the same move I did, call 855-678-6620, 855-678-6620. That's 855-678-6620, or visit them at regalassets.com. You'll be glad you did, and tell them Kerry sent you. This show was brought to you by PrepareWise. They're the leading producer of certified GMO-free, chemical-free, organic emergency preparedness food. I buy all my emergency preparedness food there, and you should too. I like the 183-serving mega sample pack. It's an amazing value. It's $280. That's less than $2 per meal. Go to preparewise.com. That's preparewise.com, and use the code LUTZ, LUTZ, to get free shipping and much more.
The Financial Survival Network, helping you to survive and thrive in the new economy. Get our complimentary newsletter at financialsurvivalnetwork.com. This is the Financial Survival Network.